2311 and Front Row are requesting Formula One's help against NASCAR, and new details have emerged in the legacy Rick Ware charter dispute. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. I'm sitting at my desk today because once again, there is so much information to go over. Welcome back to Stock Car Court. We've got updates on not one, but two completely different, completely unrelated court cases. Let's start with the 2311 Front Row case against NASCAR. Apparently, the two NASCAR teams are trying to get Formula One to help them in their antitrust case against NASCAR. Recent documentation shows that 2311 and Front Row have tried, to no avail, to get the court to compel Liberty Media, owners of F1, to share confidential business and financial information with them. Their most recent motion asks Liberty Media for 5 key pieces of information. 1. Documents sufficient to show revenues, media, ticket sales, etc., that are shared with or among F1 teams. 2. Documents sufficient to show the formula for the split among the teams and F1 for the revenue categories. 3. Documents sufficient to show the amounts of revenue shared with or retained by F1 and the teams. 4. Documents sufficient to show the valuations of expansion or current F1 teams. And finally, the Concord Agreement. Think of the Concord Agreement as sort of F1's version of the Charter Agreement. They're not really the same thing at all, and I think the Concord Agreement has been around since the 80s, but it's the best comparison I've got. 2311 and Front Row say that the requested information from F1 will help plaintiffs' experts formulate an opinion on the terms and revenues NASCAR teams would have received but for NASCAR's unlawful monopolization of premier stock car racing. So basically, the teams want to compare the F1 business model. Also, it sounds like other stick and ball sport business models like the NFL, the NBA. They want to compare other leagues to NASCAR. Formula One and other sports leagues have continued to push back against the teams not wanting to share any of their trade secrets. It's interesting. I don't follow Formula One super closely, but when we compare the latest version of the Concord Agreement to the latest version of NASCAR's Charter Agreement, there are some similarities, but also quite a few differences. I know on the F1 side, they're still finalizing the newest Concord Agreement, but as I understand, the teams, the F1 teams, get 50 to 60% of F1's profits. Compare that to NASCAR. Under the new Charter Agreement, supposedly teams get nearly 50% of the media revenue, which is NASCAR's largest income stream. A big difference, though, between F1 and NASCAR is that the Concord Agreement implements a spending cap. NASCAR has brought the idea of a cost cap to their teams in recent years, but have faced quite a bit of pushback. But one of the other big differences between the Concord Agreement and the Charter Agreement is the Concord Agreement really gives those F1 teams a seat at the table. That's something that 2311 and Front Row have really pushed for over the past year, 2 years, and that's something that NASCAR and the France family have refused to budge on. For example, permanent charters would be a huge step towards the Charter Agreement looking more like the Concord Agreement. Making the charters permanent would establish these teams as more like league franchises like you'd see in the NBA, for example. That's what 2311 has been pushing for all this time, so it's no surprise to hear they would try to recruit the NBA, F1, other leagues to give them information that might support their case against NASCAR. Interesting, not exactly shocking, but it's interesting to read through some of these documents to see exactly what kind of information 2311 and Front Row are hoping to obtain. But let's move on for the time being. There are new details emerging from the Legacy Motor Club Rick Ware Racing dispute. Real quick, let me get everyone up to speed. Last week, Legacy filed a lawsuit against Rick Ware Racing, alleging that Rick Ware Racing was trying to back out of a charter deal after they'd already signed an agreement. Rick Ware Racing says the deal was supposed to be for 2027, but they say Legacy changed the date to 2026 without telling them. Legacy Motor Club says Rick Ware and his representatives signed the document initialed in multiple places. 2026 was the date listed. You can see the conflict. Now, the allegedly signed document has not been publicized. That's the smoking gun, in my opinion. If Rick Ware and his representatives signed a document that clearly says 2026, that's on them. I'm not a legal expert, but I don't know how you weasel your way out of that one. You gotta read the fine print. But we don't know yet if that's what happened. Now, today, Legacy has successfully secured a temporary restraining order that would prevent Rick Ware Racing from dealing the charter in question for at least the next 10 days. Shout out to reporter Matt Weaver, who posted the unredacted document this afternoon. It reads, "The court hereby orders that defendant Rick Ware Racing shall be restrained from selling, leasing, or otherwise encumbering charter number 27 for 10 days from the date of this order or until such other time agreed to by the parties." Charter number 27, as I understand, is the charter that's currently being leased to Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing for Ryan Preece. Under the current NASCAR charter agreement, you cannot lease the same charter in back-to-back years. Rick Ware currently owns 2 charters, so theoretically they could have taken back their charter from RFK and then next year leased them the other charter. Just a simple swap from one year to the next. But if Rick Ware is forced to sell that number 27 charter to Legacy Motor Club, suddenly Rick Ware only has 1 charter to play with. Do they have an existing deal with RFK that says they have to lease them that charter next year? Because if that's the case, then Rick Ware Racing's out of luck. Or if there is no deal with RFK, maybe Rick Ware holds on to that 1 charter and then RFK and Ryan Preece are out of luck. So there are broad ramifications here depending on how the court rules. Another interesting detail that came out this week, reporter Jordan Bianchi was on the Dale Jr. Download podcast, and he says that Legacy Motor Club agreed to spend $45 million on this Rick Ware Racing charter. $45 million. That would be a new NASCAR Cup Series record. I believe the previous record high was $40 million a couple years ago. There's that Knighthead capital management money in play. That is big money, but it's also exactly what every other Cup Series team owner wants to see. They want these charters to keep appreciating in value. If they were ever to plateau or universally decrease in value, the business is in big trouble. $45 million. And you wonder why, the Knighthead Capital Management has bought into a team, or how, the Harris Blitzer Sports Group bought into Joe Gibbs Racing. Gainbridge, Inspire, a lot of major money investment firms are buying into NASCAR Cup Series teams like they're your typical professional sports franchise. Not sure what's going to happen between Legacy and Rick Ware Racing in the near future, but we know now that Legacy Motor Club wants to expand to a 3rd team. My immediate reaction when this news first broke last week was that Legacy Motor Club, or more specifically Toyota, are looking to strategically expand. They've talked about strengthen numbers. Toyota has some good young prospects in the pipeline. Maybe this could free up a spot for a Corey Heim. Someone last week mentioned Kaz Grala, Cup Series experience, currently the reserve or sim driver for Legacy Motor Club. Maybe there's a spot for him. We've heard from other team owners in the past that 3 cars is kind of the sweet spot here in the next gen era. It's the right balance between having a lot of data, information sharing, and not being spread too thin. That's why if you look around, Spire recently bought a 3rd charter, Trackhouse recently bought a 3rd charter, 2311, Front Row just bought 3rd charters, RFK is leasing a 3rd charter. Legacy Motor Club trying to buy this charter, they're just trying to keep up. They're just trying to keep up with everyone else. They're kind of in the middle of the pack. The more and more I think about it, Legacy expanding to a 3-car team, I think it has less to do with a specific driver or a specific sponsor, let's say. I think it has more to do with being a 3-car team and establishing themselves as a mature, developed, competitive NASCAR Cup Series race team. See, there's a ton of talk these days about a new manufacturer, maybe 2 new manufacturers joining the NASCAR Cup Series in the near future. Remember just a few weeks ago, CatchFence.com, Chris Knight reported that Ram is likely to return to the Craftsman Truck Series next year. They also report that the Dodge brand may not be far behind. Recently, reports surfaced that Dodge is bringing back their Hemi V8 engines after briefly being discontinued. That's another indication, I'd say, that Dodge is interested in going NASCAR Cup Series racing. Look at the current Cup Series landscape. The top dogs are Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, and Team Penske. Chevy, Toyota, Ford. They are top dogs for each of their respective manufacturers. They're not going to change. Who might change, though, are the Spires. the Trackhouses, the RFKs, the Legacies. All of these teams are growing, developing, building themselves up, actively trying to get more competitive to show a potential new manufacturer like Dodge, like Honda, that they could be their number one option. Think about it. Trackhouse, as competitive as they've been the past few years, they're never going to be Hendrick Motorsports. They're never going to be the top dog at Chevrolet. Trackhouse has become a broader motorsports brand. International drivers, they could be very appealing to a Honda, for example, or maybe even a Dodge. RFK, another example. I know Jack Roush is like the Ford guy, but there were reports a couple years ago that Brad Keselowski had talked to Dodge, was trying to lure Dodge 3 years ago. Brad Keselowski used to drive for Dodge. Shoot, he won a Cup championship racing for Dodge. And then there's Legacy Motor Club. I'll bring it back to them. Yes, they switched to Toyota a couple years ago, but remember, they chose not to buy into that whole Joe Gibbs Racing 2311 data sharing system. Instead, they're building out their own database, collecting whatever data they can for themselves. And remember, Jimmy Johnson is now majority owner of Legacy Motor Club. And Jimmy is not loyal to any one particular manufacturer. Yes, he raced for Chevy his entire Cup Series career, won 7 championships, but the moment Toyota could present a better offer, Legacy Motor Club jumped ship. Jimmy Johnson finished top 10 in the Daytona 500 this year in a Toyota. So there's no OEM loyalty there. The way I see it, Spire, Trackhouse, RFK, not sure about 2311, Front Row, Legacy Motor Club. One of the main reasons these mid-pack teams are expanding all at the same time, bringing in investment groups and so on and so on. Part of the reason is at least some of them hope to attract a new manufacturer. If Legacy Motor Club can go from being basically a third-rate Toyota team to a first-rate Dodge team, I think they'd take that deal. I think that'd be exactly what they're looking for, especially with the Petty 43 branding still involved. Ooh, gosh, that sells itself. So in case I didn't clarify, I don't have any inside information on any of this. I'm just examining all the information in front of us, and I think drawing a fairly rational conclusion. I would not be surprised in the slightest if over the next 2 or 3 years, at least 1 or 2 of these 3-car teams switches to a completely new OEM. Who's it going to be? Your guess is as good as mine, but I think that's part of why Legacy Motor Club is desperate to expand to a 3-car team as soon as they possibly can. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Of those teams I talked about, who do you think is most likely to join forces with Dodge, theoretically, or maybe Honda one day? Can be kind of fun to speculate. Let me know what you're thinking down in the comment section below. That's all from me, folks. Earlier today, I talked Bristol, underdogs, heavy favorites, and more with Dale Tanhart. Be sure to check that video out. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, and subscribe for more NASCAR news and commentary every single week. Have a good rest of your day, y'all. I will talk to you in the next video. Take care.